Hey, welcome to our Tales of Tryon presentation tonight. I'm Dick Calloway. I'm president of the Tryon History Museum. We have a treat for you tonight. Most of you probably know Dean Trakas. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about him in case you don't. Of course, he's hard to describe in a few words. So, Dean has practiced architecture in Tryon since 1999, so he's going on 25 years now. He's been a practicing architect since 1988. First working, he's a native of Spartanburg, first working in Charleston, then coming back to Spartanburg, starting his own architectural practice in Marion, North Carolina in 1995, and then moving to Tryon in 1999 and becoming associated with Holland Brady, who is somebody who will probably be mentioned in the talk tonight, one of Tryon's premier architects for many years. So Dean has studied under and been associated with some good people. He's a Clemson graduate, also has a bachelor's degree in architecture from Clemson. He's also a pianist, so if the pictures don't get here, he can move this piano in here and play us a few tunes. So Dean gave a talk at Presbyterian Church last year where I know some of you were present. Very well received, one of the best Tales of Tryon talks we've had. So we asked him to come back and do part 2, and he told me just this morning that there might be a part 3 because he said he wanted to get the commercial buildings one of these days. And I don't know whether he's going to get that far tonight, but he has some interesting residential ones to talk about. I'm going to turn it over to you then.
Okay.
You can give the song a dance.
Well, I'll give you all a little prelude. I'll let you do that. Well, folks, thank y'all for being here. This is a nice crowd. And I will say that this is, of course, a subject near to me, architecture in general, but especially this town, and how amazing this town is. And I didn't know how amazing this town was when we first moved. It took many years for me to realize the depth and the richness of the architectural heritage of this town. And so much of it, is from folks that came from other places. I think that's one of the things that makes Tryon so rich and so unique is that we have so many people from so many different places that bring all their own ideas and influences in, and that's why we have not been your typical small North Carolina town. And so I was very lucky to come right into that with joining Holland Brady, who was a storehouse of knowledge about the whole history of Tryon and the many great people that lived here and all the famous architects that practiced here over the years. And I mentioned part of this in my talk last time, but it's amazing. Tryon, for a town of, 1,500 people at the most, has produced so much great architecture in such a small area. And the fact that there have been, believe it or not, 47 architects that have actually either practiced or done projects here. And we talk about real architects, not the fly-by-night kind. And it's amazing. And some of the most famous names, at least in the history of architecture, were here. And I touched on a lot of those, again, in the previous talk. And there's so much. There's just so much to cover. And I didn't realize it until I got into the weeds of it last time, and had to calm it down because my dear friend Linda Lee Reynolds, who's just walked in the door here, she looked at me, she said, "Dean, you can talk for hours about one thing, but you've got 45 minutes. So whatever you do, you got to fit in 45 minutes. And I almost made it. I think I was 5 minutes over. I managed to get 30 houses, 30 buildings in the 45 minutes. Wow. So I was zipping through it. It was like the survey, the quick survey. Well, today I'm not going to do that. If my pictures will get here, and I have to thank, who's not here yet, but I'm going to thank her again when she gets here, Carrie Bass, who's a well-known photographer here. She came to my rescue today. It's one thing for me to take the pictures, another thing to get them in a format that can actually work on this PowerPoint projector, because I am really stupid. I know how to draw pictures real well. I think I'm a pretty good designer, and not too bad of an architect, but I am nowhere close to being technology oriented. So she worked hard and to get all the pictures, put in a format where you can plug them right in. She should be coming here any second now. And anyway, but I'll tell you, again, the first time that I did this was very, it was a lot of information, and I knew right away that I wasn't going to still scratch the surface. And I talked a lot about the original houses of Tryon, because the real history of Tryon goes back to the 1870s, really when the railroad started. When the railroad finally came through is when the town really prospered. There were just a few houses, couple of stores. Tryon was more of a settlement before then. But once the railroad came, people started coming in from out and started visiting, and they'd visit and then they'd fall in love and they'd stay and visit and come back and ended up moving here. And so a lot of the really prominent places in Tryon were done in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And that was the first wave of development, when a lot of the original downtown buildings were created that you see now, that really haven't changed. And then the second wave was more in the 20s, or mid to late 20s, which is when a lot of the institutions we know of in Tryon got started. And then of course then the Depression happened, and all that sort of went down the wayside. So my first talk again was about those first developments. Melrose Avenue, all the beautiful houses up in Melrose, in Gotcho Hill, which is where I live. I didn't realize how many great houses, how many historic houses are just on those several streets, going back to the 1800s, and they all have a story. What I used, and some of you might have seen this, there was an architectural survey done in 1979. Very, very well done, and very famous because it's something that everybody has referenced over the years. It explains not only the history of Tryon, but the history of the buildings and the architecture of Tryon. It's an architectural survey. And up until 1979, it pretty much covered everything. And so I use that as my guide for the first part. Today, when I can actually start my show, we're going to concentrate on just several projects. We're not going to try to go through so many. And that's why there's going to be a part 3. I will say I didn't quite have the time to really put as much into the presentation today as I had before, because I'm, like a lot of architects, I'm extremely busy right now. And it's a good problem to have, but it really doesn't allow for much extracurricular stuff right now. So that's one reason why I've limited the talk. But one other reason I limited the talk was because I wanted to be able to talk more about the history of the several houses that I've got and the people. Because I think with a lot of folks, and I'm sure y'all are the same way, it's interesting and fascinating to see the actual buildings and the details and the characteristics that make them unique. But it's another thing about the human element, the people that live there, the people that built the house, the people that designed the house, and that moved here successively. And so that's why I wanted to get a little bit further under the surface to see that. The next presentation will be more about the commercial buildings, all the downtown buildings, some of which we were lucky enough to renovate and fix. And again, some of the outlying areas, because right now I've pretty much just kept it to Tryon in the immediate vicinity, but there's so many neat buildings and houses on the outskirts that we just have not had time to talk about yet. But one of the houses I'm going to talk about is my dear friend Dick Calloway's house, who was very nice enough to let me come in and take some pictures and shared the history of the house with me. And it's right up the street, right on Berwick Drive. And also, I was lucky enough to go see Bill and Becky McCall's house, which is the original McCall house, which I'm going to tell you a little bit about. But Bill's right here to help me if I forget a few things. Also, we're going to talk about, again, one of my very favorite houses, Top of Piney, which is the house that actually not most recently, but very recently, the Lane family, Bob Lane, and of course Scott ended up inheriting it. They owned it for years. And now there's a retired architect named Nigel Stroud that lives there. He's from Beaufort, but they live here full time now. They bought the house from the Lanes, and of course there's a big history, which I'll explain to that. There's also a house that's right outside of Tryon. I just had to put in today. It's called Dunwick. It was actually a house that goes back to 1927. It's a very, very famous place, just right in, actually almost in Columbus. It was designed by the first female architect, one of the very first female architects in the country, for a very prominent family from Chicago, which of course you'll also see all the way through the presentation. And if you've been in Tryon long enough, you know that there's a real connection to Chicago from Tryon. I learned it when I first got here because Holland who was 75 at the time when I joined him. He had like 12 projects going on at the time, 12 houses. And out of the 12 projects, 8 of them were from Chicago. 8 of the clients were from Chicago. And it still continues today. And again, so many of the historic properties that I've talked about have that same connection. So, yay! I just about ran out of everything to say. Okay, whoever has not met Carrie Bass, this is the wonderful Carrie Bass. Her most photographer in this town, and she was so nice enough to help me to organize these things, and took a lot of the pictures that you'll see today, which are much more professional than I could ever take. Carrie, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, all right, now here's the 0 hour. But to tell you, I mean, I'm open to suggestion. If anybody else has anything to say about Sunnydale, it was built in the 20s, along with the tea house, the Lake Linear Tea House, and it was owned by the Perhulis family. And this was the winter restaurant, and then the tea house was the summer restaurant. Tom, you can vouch for that, right? I don't remember, but I heard that. Well, anyway, so this, and of course, this has been several restaurants since then, but this was very famous as the restaurant run by the Perhulis family, which are my relatives from way back. Yeah. Anyway, okay, so here we go.
We used to have little theater plays in here in the round, and we had our junior, senior proms in here. When I was in high school, so it's a great place.
And we think this building was built about 1939, so what you said, early 30s. Yeah.
Okay, this is the home of Dick and Fran Calloway. Okay, now that's the back. No, that's the front. Yeah, that is a house that was built, and I've got notes on this. Built in 1926. Okay. This is a classic arts and crafts house, and you will also notice there's a lot of different styles of houses in this town. But I'll tell you, one of the most prevalent styles is, of course, the arts and crafts and the craftsman style. And there's a lot of versions of that. But particularly in the Gillette Woods area and the Melrose Avenue, you see a lot of that influence, especially in the 20s, which was, I guess, the heyday of when all the really great Tryon houses were built, at least the original. So this house was built by, the house was originally built by the Frost, but no relationship to the Frost that most people know here. The Frost that most people know is Betty and Norm Frost, which was connected to the Doubleday family, which I talked extensively about at the last presentation I did, because I did several of the Doubleday properties on that. That was a wonderful show too. But this is Edward and Ida Frost. We don't know where they came from, do we?
Milwaukee.
Milwaukee, that's right. They came from Milwaukee. Okay, and they moved here. They actually bought the land. You know, this is right down on Braywick, right just past Melrose Avenue. And of course, William Gillette owned most of all the land in this area. They bought the land originally from William Gillette himself. Okay, and in 1922. Okay, and they actually finally built the house in 1926. And they lived there for almost 20 years. Okay, they died in 1945 and 1946. And then the house went into their estate. Now, but first let me tell you about the designer of this house. And I'm sure any of you that either know Tryon architecture or came to my presentation last time will know the name J. Foster Searles, who to me was, before Holland Ready, was the most prominent architect and did some of those beautiful houses that you all have seen or been in this town. He was practiced here for many years, and for 30 years, right?
Close to
30 years, right?
Between 25 and 30.
That's right. Okay. Well, so many of the houses, especially in the Melrose Circle, Melrose area, he did. This one was really unique, and that it was a house that was totally one of a kind. Had a lot of really neat architectural details, a lot of interesting angles in the house that you don't normally see. And he did it. He designed it for them. And again, so they lived here for that long. And the house was very characteristic of so many, with its stucco exterior, a lot of the wood interior, and gorgeous interior woodwork that you'll see in a minute. They then sold, or the estate sold the house to the Hartness family. And I don't know if you know local history, especially if you're from Spartanburg like me, the Hartness family started the Coca-Cola distributorship in Spartanburg, and they were one of the premier Pepsi, I'm sorry. My father would not like that because he was a big Coca-Cola guy. They were the Pepsi guys in Spartanburg, and they had one of the biggest Pepsi distributorships in the South. And so there was Tom Hartness Sr. Bought the house and from the estate in 1946, and never lived here full time. Lived here part time. In fact, actually, the Frost they didn't live here full time either, right?
It was one of about 4 homes they had.
Okay. All right, and so Tom Hartness lived part-time in this house. He also had a big house in Spartanburg. And there was a big connection, y'all. Even today, there's a big connection between Spartanburg and Tryon. Spartanburg is always looked at Tryon as sort of a bedroom community spot. And so a lot of the big families there would have a place up in here in Tryon as a vacation home. And so then when he died, they left their house to a relative, a lady who we don't really know her name, but she lived in the house till 1981. She bought about 10, 11 years, and then she sold the house to the developers that actually created the Braywick Estates townhomes that you see scattered all around. This house kind of sits in an island and is surrounded by the condos that are around it. This was actually, Dick said, actually considered a condominium in itself. It was sold as a condominium. So again, but of course it stayed vacant for a while until Larry Schwartz, the accountant, the people, some of you might know his name, bought the house in '83. And then the Sweatmans, which are another fairly prominent family, they bought it in '86. Oh, sorry, '06. '06. And they lived here until 2014, when the Callaway's bought it. This house has a lot of unique features. One of the unique features, and I'll start showing some pictures, is that for a house this age to have 5 bathrooms was pretty amazing. And that's another thing about houses in Tryon, buildings in Tryon. They were a lot ahead of their time, both in terms of plumbing and kitchens and air conditioning and insulation, all kinds of neat things that you wouldn't see a lot of other places. They were just they were a little bit ahead of their time here because, again, all folks that moved here from the big cities, they brought all that innovation technology with them. And it's amazing that the local building community could fathom it all, and actually we had some wonderful builders here in town from then into now. Okay, so here we go. Next. Oh, wrong one. That's a different house. Okay, let me go back to go back. Okay. And that's another view of the end of the house with the interesting wood detailing up there. On the side, that's another side view there. And that's the back of the house. Very simple architectural forms. All the intricacy, the light is on the inside of the house, and that's also very typical of arts and crafts. It is very quiet exterior, not a lot of frou-frou, because that was the whole philosophy of the arts and crafts movement, was to get away from all the fussiness of the Victorian and the Empire and the more more mannered styles of the turn of the century. And so, again, that shows you. And that, of course, I love the understated front door, which also was a hallmark of the arts and crafts, not to make a big splash when you walk in. Again, the surprises once you get in. But it's a great front door, the original front door. House, Dick, you just chime in anytime you want to here.
Good job.
And, oh, well, you can't see me. You can't see the house because of me, my big rear end. Okay, this is, I love everything about this house. What's great about it, of course, is a lot of the wonderful woodwork. Again, J. Foster Searles, one of his hallmarks was the beautiful woodwork, the wainscoting, the trim, everything. It was all just handcrafted, and a lot of it was beautiful mahogany and the quarter sawn oak that you saw so much back then. A lot of great details. This is the dining room in the house with a beautiful fireplace and interesting picture molding going around. And that's another picture of the dining room with this gorgeous chandelier that is not quite what you'd expect in an arts and crafts home, but it fits beautifully. And you guys found that.
Yeah,
Y'all added that to it. But all their furniture fits perfectly in this house. It's like it was there from the very beginning. And again, beautiful. Now, I didn't mean to do that. Now that is, of course, that's the room that I love, which is the living room, which shows you, again, the detail on the woodwork, the mantel, and the actual Gothic arches that are there, and the beams in the rough cast walls and ceiling, and the beautiful floors. It's just got a real warmth to it in general. And there's the wainscot again, and how it's worked into the actual bookshelf. This house had beautiful built-in barrister bookcases that became integral with the actual wainscoting, and you can see that the detail is all blended together, which is fantastic, and again, very typical of the style. That's a longer view showing that same look at with all the beautiful bookcases. That was a good enough reason to buy the house, wasn't it, Dick?
that's why Fran wanted it.
Yeah.
Well, that was not in any of the realtors' pictures. We walked in, there were 60 feet of glass-in walnut bookcases. So we were immediately placed it. When you get that back, I'll get this.
I think
Yeah. And they're all full of great books too. Anyway, it's one of my favorite things too. So again, very typical. Now this is where it really is cool. It's the little nooks and crannies in the houses that I love. The little neat spaces that aren't the big spaces. This is when you first walk in and you look to the left, that neat little hallway right there, looking into the cool little powder room. What are the 5 bathrooms?
Dean, I didn't tell you this morning, this might interest some people here. That picture on the wall is Mount War, great racehorse with his groom, Will Harmon. And did Brooks Hamilton take that picture?
No.
Okay.
Their house is full of wonderful paintings and wonderful photographs and a whole lot of equestrian. So because, of course, Dick and Fran lived in Louisville for a long time, and so they understand the history of the equestrian sport better than a lot of folk, and a lot of great pictures of Man of War, a lot of great pictures of Secretariat, and of course, just a lot of historic things. And so that's a neat story. Now, this is of course one of the neat parts of the house too. These houses in general had wonderful stairwells, and of course none of them would pass code today. We could not do anything today and get it by the inspectors today the way they did it back then. But that's what made them so fun, and just that's what gave it the personality. And so this stairwell I love because it winds around, and you've got these beautiful things that run up, and the wainscot runs up with it. And not the easiest thing to get up and down, but that's what keeps you in shape, right? Absolutely. Okay, so that's that, and then of course there's a plan of the house. Now, who drew that plan, Dick? Did Searles draw that?
No, Shannon Sweatman drew it.
Oh yeah.
We bought the house.
That you bought the house from. Well, it's very well done, very professional. That's the main floor of the house, and again, we were just looking up the stairwell right here. That's the little hallway, and that's the little powder room right there when you walk down. And so what's neat is about the entry, the foyer is very intimate, it's very small scale, and you get a feel, the warmth of the house, and then you walk into the big room, which is here and then here, of course. And so that's also very typical. But you see, it's a very simple plan. That's looking back down the stairwell. And now this is what's cool. Dick was nice enough to show me into some of the nether regions of the house, including their now Fran, you probably didn't want me to see this.
The linen closet.
The linen closet. Well, the cool thing about the linen closet is the cabinetry that was in there that was built by whoever the cabinet
His
was.
name was Jones.
Jones, okay.
He lived in
Well,
Asheville.
Mr. Jones signed one of the inside one of the doors, and then Dick opened up this door, and that right there says J. Foster Searles, Tryon, North Carolina. I thought that was really neat. I've never yet done that. I've never actually signed anything in any of my houses yet. I don't think Holland did either. But that is something right there. So that was a real joy to see that. Okay, so now we finally left Dick's house, and thank you so much again, Dick. And now we've gone to one of my all-time favorite houses anywhere. And again, a classic example of what I call the storybook style, which is sort of a combination of English Tudor, the arts and crafts, a little bit of Gothic revival. It's just a mishmash, but it's a glorious, wonderful thing. And I mean, several houses in this town were built in this style. And I'm going to show you two of them. This is Top of Pine. This was a house that was done mid-20s. I mentioned this in the earlier presentation, but I didn't have any pictures of it. This house was designed by a fairly famous architect named Harold Doubleday, which is part of the Doubleday family that owned a lot of land here, owned Roraima, they owned all the vineyards. They started the Tryon vineyards, which of course Tryon was famous for its grapes for many, many years. In fact, the table grapes were some of the best in the world. They were featured at the Ritz in Paris. They were featured at the World of Astoria in New York, and a lot of them came from the Doubleday vineyards. And of course, the Doubledays were famous for lots of things besides grapes. They were famous for, Civil War battles and for starting baseball and other things too. And of course, they're a printing company. But anyway, one of the Doubledays, Harold, actually became an architect and went to work for a very, very famous architecture firm in New York called Shreve and Lamb. And they designed several fairly prominent buildings in New York. One of them, I think, being the Empire State Building. But he designed this house for, I'm trying to remember who the house was originally done for. He was an industrialist from Chicago. I asked Scott Lang about this, and he remembers some of the history. Now, what I do know, of course, the family that lived here the longest was the Lucky family, and they're very prominent also Tryon family for many years. And if anybody knows anything about the Lucky, I'm all ears. But they came from Chicago as well, and they bought the house, I think, from the original owner that it was built for, and then I think the Luckies sold it to Jim Tabb, and Jim Tabb lived in here for many years. Jim Tabb was, of course, locally famous for starting our barbecue festival, and then the Tabbs lived there for a long time, and I think that it was Bob Lane that actually bought the house from so there really weren't that many owners. This house was finished in 1926 as well, like most of the houses you're going to see today.
Dean?
Yes.
My aunt, Ellen Chaffee,
Uh-huh.
she and her husband from Chicago,
Uh-huh.
Bill Chaffee, bought the house and lived there for a number of years.
Okay. Were they, do you remember what time frame that was?
70s, I believe.
Okay. So they were probably after the Luckies then. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for that. They probably had the house before the Tabbs had it then. Yeah. So the Chappies were there for many years. Okay. Thank you so much.
Is that like a patio? That's not the
Yes,
front of the
that's
house.
their outdoor that's their back patio. That's looking at the back of the house. And these pictures were freshly snapped just a few hours ago. These are some of Carrie's. Now you can tell right away the difference in the quality. These are Carrie's pictures. Look how nice and blue the sky looks. You know, it's just, you know, we do what we can do. But anyway, this house was, again, sort of a hodgepodge. A lot of it, and all native stone. This is truly the top of Piney Mountain. There was some discussion about whether that really was, but I got it confirmed from Scott Lane. Of course, you know, his dad and mom lived here. They didn't live here full time, but this was their getaway. This is what brought them to Tryon. One of the things that brought them to Tryon. Of course, then they fell in love with Tryon, and we know all the wonderful things that Bob and Jackie did, including this place here. They renovated and fixed so many buildings in this town, and this was one of their labors of love, was renovating and updating this view, because it was starting to really get disrepair. So thank goodness for Bob. And then Bob was so nice enough to turn around and bequeath it to Little Theater through the foundation, you know. So there was a wonderful legacy he left, along with lots of other things that he did in this town. But anyway, so that's that. And again, you see, you know, again, so much of this was not really designed in detail. In the old days, architects didn't draw 40 sheets of drawings. They didn't detail every single thing. They left it up to the contractor and to the craftsman to add their own creativity and their own dimensions of the houses. So a lot of these things like this, like these brick details, and just of course, you know, the edge details and some of these things here, and the way the stone. This was sort of an Italianate thing that they added after the fact, but that was not actually drawn. That was actually done by them and made up by the actual craftsmen themselves. And that's the old, sort of the old master mason tradition that goes back to the 1500s. So that's that. Let's go backwards again. Carrie just can't stand this, so she's always got to get a mountain view picture in there somewhere. That's part of the view. Of course, the view is 360. I mean, it's just a glorious place up there, and they got it all up there. That's the approach to the house from below, from the parking court down below. That's looking up at the front door and the main tower of the house with the addition. And so it's a house that really doesn't present itself so well because it's so surrounded by trees. You don't get a big broad perspective of the house when you first drive up to it, because it's so nestled in the trees up there. So that's more of a detailed shot of the original tower, which is the grand center of the house. And again, you see a lot of that. You see the stone. The stone came from so many different places. It wasn't quarried in one area, and it is quarried stone. It's mostly granite. But a lot of it was native granite, right out of the hillside, very close by. Some of it was brought in from other places. You can see the different characters. Some of the rock is more of the tan, brownish rock, and some of it more of the gray, silver rock that you can see. But it all blends together, and then you can see there's not a lot of real pattern to it, which is you will see of so many of the old houses in Tryon. There was not it wasn't a regular pattern that you see in the churches, for example. But that's one thing I love about the architecture here. It's beautiful, it's elegant, but it's not fussy. It's informal, and it's just Tryon is what it is. Okay. Again, there's another entry shot. That's a shot looking at the end of the house with beautiful, that wonderful wood detailing right there too. That's one of the neat features of the house, the gargoyle lantern that greets you when you go in the back door. I think that's original. I think the actual lamp, the glass is original as well.
Wow.
So really cool stuff. Again, that's another picture of the exterior. It's just a fascinating, wonderful place. And that's the coolest part of the house. That's actually what they call the dungeon. Now, one thing about this house, it sits on a cistern, a huge cistern, that originally was the water source for Tryon. Many, many, many years ago. 1,500 gallons, I think. More than that, I think. It is huge. It was enough to service the town in the old days. And they say, the water in Tryon is good water, but it used to be fantastic water because it all came right out of the mountain. And then they let the lines kind of go down, and you know, and then Lake Lanier came along, and that's when they started getting a lot of the water from Lake Lanier. But anyway, that's right there next to where the cistern is. It's down to that lowest level, so it's really, really cool. And if I ever went to stay there, that's where I'm going to stay. This is the actual stair going down to the basement, and again, another funky, crazy-looking stair that wouldn't pass code. But it's just where all the joy of the house is, and this is what I love is the little spaces like this that give you the joy. It's just the thing you just discover when you come in. And there's stupid me, my big bald head right there. That's a scale figure, right, Carrie? Okay. Right. Okay. This is some pictures of the inside. You know, the little cozy spaces in a lot of the archways that you see. That's a little porch, sort of I used to call it a sunroom there. And now that's the actual stair going upstairs. That's actually the second floor looking back down to the first floor, which stacks right over the other stair going to the basement. So it's the same shape and a neat thing, just really amazing. This is the master bedroom. Now this is something I must say, and I don't know who did this. I'm not going to blame Bob Lane for this, because Scott's not here. This is the master bedroom, which is upstairs in the new part. That's, believe it or not, that's all Wormy Chestnut paneling. Of course, Wormy Chestnut is, you know, what we prize so highly around here. Somebody went pickle pat, painted it. It needs to be shot. So Nigel's next big project is to get all that off of there and get back to the original.
Nigel put it on there.
Huh?
That's Elizabeth.
Oh, that's you! Hey, Scott!
Hey.
I didn't know you showed up.
No, we left it all natural when we left.
Are you saying Elizabeth put...
I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying.
Nigel was really mad that it was on there. Now whether she did it without telling him, but anyway, he swears he's going to take it back off because I was a little miffed when I saw it. Thank you. I sure didn't want to be talking out of school.
They're still our relatives, so I can't say.
No, you can't. Well, we're not going to say anything bad about anybody today. Okay, well, thank you. Anything else you'd like to throw in? By the way, were you here when she mentioned about the Chaffees living there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I should have studied up. I didn't catch the
It's okay.
of it and all that.
This was, I know, I hit you up at the last minute, of course. So thank you, though. Okay, anyway, it's a cool place. That's in the top sort of
Right,
door.
that's not original. I mean, that really was added on many years afterwards to get an expanded office and a third bedroom upstairs.
That's right. That's what when they add that stucco with the little fake rocks and everything up there to give it the sort of, you know.
It was never a favorite.
No. Okay. Well, thank you. All right. Nice view again from up there. And this, again, the wonderful nooks and crannies, a little inset built-in shelves and bookcases and things like that, which again, very typical of the style. And I love that. I just love that. And that's another saying that would not pass code today. I could barely get through that door. It's just so cool.
You're talking about the height or the width?
Both. I mean, height-wise, not so much an issue with, for sure. But again, it's just one of those things. It's like, you know, a lot of things. Like we were discussing that, how, you know, we were talking about how, you know, a lot of houses didn't have garages. And Dick was bemoaning the fact that that's the one thing they wish they had in their house was a real garage. And of course, a lot of the old houses did have garages, but it's amazing how small garages were back in the old days. And you think about how big the cars were. You know, so how do they even fit in those teeny little spaces in there? Anyway, oh well, people were smaller then too, they say. There's a nice long review, and that shows you in context that there too. So again, the beautiful dock ceilings, the spaces that are way up there in the roof. Okay, another great space. Uh-oh, missed that. Okay, this is a great shot of the foyer when you walk in that beautiful front door, looking through there, looking at the stairway going up there. Again, showing you. Now, Scott, is this floor? That's y'all didn't change that floor, did you? That was the original floor.
It's a tile.
Okay. It's so nice that Scott's here. Of course, again, all that. I'm assuming that all the cabinetry in there was original. Okay. The cars, I think Nigel brought, right? So again, that's a wonderful sort of a butler's pantry, sort of connector room to the kitchen, back towards the sitting room in there. And because, most houses had that space back then. They either had a butler's pantry, they had some sort of a serving area, intermediate transitional area where everything got staged, So it's a great space. And I almost helped myself to a glass of wine. I said, no, we don't have time for that. Okay, again, there's another nice shot of the foyer with a beautiful rope molding and that gorgeous chandelier in the middle. So again, you see how intimate and small scale the entrance is, and you don't really get the wow until you walk from there. And that, again, was an arts and crafts. It was also a Frank Lloyd Wright thing. Give you the small, make you feel squeezed a little bit, and then you get the big impression when you walk through. So it's very much the philosophy of it. All right, so that's that. And again, another shot of, it almost looks like a painting, doesn't it? Love the detailing here. Love the old steel doors and windows, which are just so prized. And everybody, that wants a traditional house like this, they all want that kind of window. When now the window companies that are making look-alike windows that have the same detailing as those, they're not real steel, but you can actually get that look. And I'm actually doing a house with those same box doors, but that's the real thing right there. And it's just another example of how wonderful this place is. And gee, Scott, what's the story on this little?
It's a little fireplace in the dining room. And what was the small dining room?
Oh, that's right. Okay. Just again, very
Backs
utilitarian.
up onto an outdoor fireplace.
Okay, all right. And there's the beautiful great room right there. She caught me on the phone there. How about that? Oh, I think I was talking to Scott Lane right there. Please, God, help me. Anyway, wonderful space. The proportion, the height, the width, the length of the room is just wonderful. It's not monumental. It's very human scale, and yet big enough to have a nice big party and be able. And of course, the fireplace. Now, also tell me, Scott, is this a Tryon toy maker's mantle?
Yeah, as the beams are too.
The beams, right.
The beams overhead are all great lines.
Right. From the original talk. And again, I talked about that in the last presentation. We have the tradition of the Tryon toy makers, and a lot of the Biltmore industry folks have influenced down here. Either lived here. In fact, J. Foster Searles designed a wonderful little storybook English cottage right there, right off of Melrose Avenue. When you first turn on Melrose Circle, that beautiful little English cottage. Searles did that, and who was the fellow that lived in, who actually...
Mr. Arthur.
Mr. Arthur, that's right. He actually worked for Biltmore Industry. He did all the woodwork in there. He also did mantles and did all these things for all these other houses. So a lot of the woodwork you see in the Biltmore house, a lot of the handiwork, that same handiwork was in these houses too. And so, again, just another beautiful example. And of course, the views and everything else are fantastic. Again, more great views. Hello. Okay, that's looking down, up to the upstairs, and that's looking back in the other side of the night. So, okay, here we go. That's the dining room. More of the wonderful beams, the beautiful floors, and has another bit more of an up-close shot of. You can see they got the grapevine detailing right there, the stone corbels, and I imagine is mahogany, probably. Oh well, who cares? It's beautiful. Anyway, really neat. Okay, so all right, I'm gonna just keep on scrolling through here. All right, and it's neat because of course Carrie had the ability to get the wide angle and actually be able to get the whole perspective of this thing. How come it's not?
What are the dimensions on that room?
Probably about maybe 19 or maybe 20 feet wide by maybe about 30 long. Scott, what think I,
Yeah, because
Don't know for sure,
I
I
remember it
guess.
as being a very large room.
it's a large room. It's larger than most people's typical great rooms. It's a lot longer than it is wide,
Right.
for sure. It's almost like two different spaces in one. I don't know why I can't go backwards, unless that was the beginning of my slideshow. All right, now we're going to finally get to Bill McCall's house. Well, we're going to start in Bill's living room. Is that good enough place? This house means a lot to me, although, you know, I didn't grow up in this house, but somebody standing in the front row did. The thing that means the most to me was this house was built by Dr. C.W. McCall Sr. Dr. McCall hired this young fella who was still in architecture school, who had never done a single project in his life, to design this house for him. And that young fellow was named Holland Brady. But there's a history that goes before this wonderful house, which is a real landmark in Tryon. What was originally designed here was a grand manor house for a family from Chicago again. When in doubt, just say Chicago. Okay. Now, but the property that this house was originally designed for, not this house, but the predecessor house, was actually, the property was a camp, a summer camp. Now, how many of you knew that there was a summer camp in Tryon, North Carolina, many, many years ago? I didn't think so. Okay, it was called Camp Sunnydale. Okay? And so the people that bought the property from the camp were the Godfrey's. Okay, G.M. Godfrey. Okay, bought the land from the camp in 1926. Okay, and there's actually a local connection to the Godfreys. The Shuford family is a fairly well-known family in Tryon. They actually used to own the dairy farm over in Columbus, there's a connection. It was one of the Schuferts was
Robert and Carla.
Carla, right?
The grandkids, I think.
The grandkids of the Godfreys.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was a local Tryon connection to them when they got here. Unfortunately, they were going to build this beautiful English Tudor grand home on this property. And they got a little ways into it, as if they built the foundation. And they had it all right there in concrete. It started in 1926. And then this thing called the Depression came along and rendered that project obsolete. And so unfortunately they had to sell everything. And so they hired some very prominent architects from Chicago, and I can't remember the name, Sunny or well, doesn't matter. They have no connection to Tryon. Okay. Anyway, so it sat there for a while, right? Just with the foundation built and nothing else. And your dad, Dr. McCall Sr., found the property, but the Godfreys still owned the property.
Found it in the mid-40s.
Mid-40s, 1945 plus or minus. Okay? All right. And then decided he wanted to build his home there. So that's when he found Holland. Of course, he'd known Holland forever.
Holland had been one of his Boy Scouts.
One of his Boy Scouts. Because Dr. McCall Sr. was the Scoutmaster, and Holland was one of his best Boy Scouts. So that's how it was a connection there. And Holland at the time was in architectural school. Now Holland started before the war. He started architectural school at this little place called Clemson. But then General Patton decided he wanted Holland to fight with him, and so he sent him to France, and he fought in Bastogne and fought all the way with General Patton till the end of the war. And so after the war, Holland came back and went back to architectural school. But this time he says, "I'm not messing with little old Clemson. I want to go to real school." So he went to Michigan, to the University of Michigan, and finished his architectural degree there. In the meantime, he actually interned in Chicago for one of the most prominent architects, not named Frank Lloyd Wright, in Chicago. But while he was a student, still at Michigan, is when Dr. McCall got in touch with Holland and said, I want you to do this house for me, which was a real thrill for Holland, of course. So guess what? They designed the McCall house exactly on the foundation of the original house that was there. And so it fit, it's a beautiful fit. And so the house was finished. It was designed and built in 1948. So it was a couple of years after they started the process. And it was built by one of the most famous construction names in the history of Tryon, the Langford family. There was two brothers, Ed and Charles. Now Charles is the one I was most familiar with. But Ed Langford, the brother, was the actual one that helped build this house. And it was so beautifully built. Again, so many of the telltale marks. This is sort of getting into the modernist period, which is what Holland was raised on. All Holland's great old houses, the original houses he did in Tryon, were of the sort of the modernist mid-century sort of variety. And there are a lot of the mid-century hallmarks of this house as well too. And of course, once you look at the wood, you see a lot of the wood detailing, the trim detailing. And the greatest thing about this house, it is so full of wormy chestnut. Every room is just top to bottom, and it's a delight. It's like being in a candy store, an architectural candy store. But Holland, he learned so much of this, in school, but he also learned it from his predecessor, Shannon Merriweather. Because I'm the fifth guy in our firm. Our firm goes back to 1935, started by a fellow named Russell Walcott from Chicago. And Russell was here and retired to Tryon and then unretired because he was asked by so many of his former clients to design vacation houses in Tryon. So, and then Merriweather joined him, and then Holland, of course, when he finally got out of school and moved back to Tryon, joined Mr. Merriweather. But this was way before he even did that. So again, I got to finally see the plans, and that's what I started showing before. But there are a lot of neat tricks about this house. Now, Bill, would you like to tell them about this little desk?
This is the kitchen, and this is Mark is sitting right over there, my little brother. And we grew up in this kitchen, and they made that little slide-out table for us, with shorter little stools. We would sit there and have our lunch. And that was us. It slides out and goes back in.
Now, the fellow that did the actual millwork, that did the actual cabinetry in the house, did that.
Yeah, that was always there.
Yeah, that's so cool, and a lot of other cool things too. Again, more of the great. This is more of the back of the house. Everything from the kitchen back, all the service parts of the house. And the bedrooms, right?
Yeah,
were done in the knotty pine, which is still beautiful. But of course, they reserved the wormy chestnut for the main rooms because that was like gold. Okay, so this is the great bar that we all love when we go to Bill's house. So and then that's the dining room. Now tell us about the table, Bill.
Well, that's the dinette, little
Dinette, right.
Breakfast and lunch. And that table was at my grandfather's house. And that was the family table for my dad, and his brothers and sister grew up around that little table in Bar City. So. And that white picture hanging up there was in my granddad's dental office. So there's all kind of stuff.
All kind of great connections here. And again, it's so integral to the history of Tryon too, because they were the dental family. I mean, that's where everybody went. Okay, thank you for that. Again, more great deal. Of course, how many old houses that y'all know of had the little phone niche when you first walked in? And what's cool, not only did it have the phone niche, it had the phone book niche right below it. And there's still a rotary dial phone in there that works. And ventilation, that's right, that's right. That's right. I'm so glad you're here. That detail there. Oh, and this is cool. This is looking from the foyer. Again, the foyer was very understated, very small, but cozy. And then you walked into the big room. Of course, they had these beautiful pocket doors. They came out with the glass in them. Again, it matched also the wormy chestnut. So just another great detail. And that's looking again into the wonderful great room there. Of course, beautiful views out the back. This was the original screen porch.
This was originally a screen porch.
Right.
With a little tiny den next to it. The den was so small that we took that wall out and had closed it in.
Which is a glorious space, and it's just full. Y'all spend a lot of time there, don't you? That's right. And that cool chair in the corner, especially. Okay. All right. And there's Senior Dr. McCall and Mrs. McCall
On their wedding day.
on their wedding day. They were quite the handsome pair. He kind of rubbed off on both of y'all, by the way. Mark, you can chime in anytime you want on this. Again, a wonderful niche. Originally, there was an old door that was.
Yeah, Dad made a wormy chestnut out of an old wormy chestnut drawer that we left over and made a desk.
Yeah,
That was
original.
my desk that we bought.
Yeah.
When we moved in. That's-
Neat though, right? Again, showing the little nooks and crannies and all places that just made it livable. Again, and then a beautiful library and bookcase and it's just one thing after another. All right, I got to show you this hallway. This is a big thing. Okay, now look, that hallway is exactly 3 feet wide, and that was like an absolute back in the day. First, Mr. Merriweather said that a hallway shall never be more than 3 feet wide, because if it's more than 3 feet wide, somebody's going to try to put a piece of furniture in it and mess it up. It's meant to be walked through and nothing else. So he taught Holland that. So Holland, all of his earlier houses had those little narrow hallways just like that. We finally broke away from that one, but it's another neat trick of the old time. And again, some of the bedrooms that are great, and there, the young McCall boys in their heyday. Yeah, boy. Signs of great things to come. And now whose bedroom is that?
That's our bedroom.
That's y'all. Okay, that's right. Okay, neat. Okay. All right. Oh, and that's the entrance. The beautiful front door that's original to the house. Now, what you see coming out in front, the post that you see was actually added. Now, Holland did an addition.
Yes.
Okay. And he did. In fact, he did 2 additions. First thing he did was add the carport that you see in the front, which now that's actually looking at the side of the house. Shows you the great detailing that you'll see a lot of other houses. When you see a house in Tryon that has brick or stone going right up to the windowsill like this, that's a Shannon Merriweather and a Holland Brady trademark, as you see. So if you see in the old house around and you see that detailing, which is pretty prevalent, you pretty much can guarantee it's either Holland or a Shannon that did that. Okay. And that's showing the entrance to the house. And you can see the carport. It's a terrible picture, I'm sorry, but you can see the more recently added carport in the front. And that's another closer shot of the house. But it fits beautifully. It's like it was made, of course it was all done at the same time. Another neat trick, combination of the vertical board and batten and the horizontal siding, which was done a lot. Love the windows, of course the windows, the original casement windows, and that's around the back. Now, what's neat, you're going to start seeing a little bit of the vestige of the original foundation that was there before the McCalls moved in. See that concrete foundation?
Yeah.
It was an 18-inch thick board
8.
foundation.
Yep. Right. That's what the house was built on. That was the original foundation.
It was going to be a 3-story stone house.
Oh, it's just massive.
Yeah.
I got to see the pictures of that too. You see the curved wall around? Okay. I'm sorry, wrong way. Okay. Oh, tell us about that table. That has nothing to do with this presentation. I just had to get a picture of it.
When we rebuilt the deck, some of the old wood came out. My buddy of mine in our bridge built me a table, a cook table out there. So when we do oyster roast and crawfish boil,
Yeah.
you put it on that thing.
It's
He built
great.
me a table. He had done one like that, so we built it for him.
That's great.
Out of the deck. wood.
Okay. Now you see the board form concrete. Now, and we actually use this now a lot. The boards go on, and then you pop them off, and it gives you that sort of a wood grain look to the concrete. It wasn't meant to look pretty. It was just meant, that's the way it was done then, and now we do it for the effect. And you can see again that curve, the curved shape of that. Okay, that's looking from way down below, looking back up at it. So again, a beautifully simple house, and very indicative of that style, that period of architecture that so many of the houses in this town have. You drive down Gillette Woods, all the way through town, and you see so much of that, and so much of that is the legacy of Holland. And there's Dr. McCall there, and tell us about that little piece right there.
Okay, that was on the original foundation, and that was to be one of the many fireplaces in that original house. And if you see this right down in the lower right corner, right there, yeah, that right there is a pile of dried up concrete. When they were pouring the foundation, they'd almost finished it, and they were pouring concrete right there where that little landing is. And apparently the foreman came on and said, they're done, the crash is coming, we can't go any further, so we quit. And that's a pile of concrete that was in the concrete picture at the time. Holland, there was a party here of some sort, and Holland was here, and we asked him if he wanted to
Here
come by.
in
this
Sunnydale,
building, yeah.
okay.
Everything, and we asked him if he wanted to come by the house and just see it again, you know. And this is a house he built in 1948, first house he ever built in Tryon. And he came over there and he says, "Did you ever find those piles of concrete that we dumped out in the woods and put around, you know, where they had to stop?" And I said, "Yeah." I didn't know what that was. He said, that's what that was.
That's so cool.
There's 2 or 3 little piles of dried concrete from 1948.
And again, that's another reason this house means so much to me, because I get the connection through my dear friend Holland back to this and Tryon history too. So again, that's looking at it from the other side.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's a little addition they did later on, and again, the detail in the corner windows, which are another trademark of that style. So, okay, all right, and that's that's the rock work that was done by the Walker family.
Yeah.
They were sort of the first family of rock work.
Yeah, there's rock masons on the other side of the garage, of the yard, there was a wall going down, and as you enter the place, and the Walker family did that. And when we first moved into the house, Mark and I were just kids, and we were down at the end of the hall in the bed, and my mom looked down the hallway, and there was a live a copperhead in the hallway, between her and her kids, okay? And Dad was up at the next house, moving some things down because we were staying there temporarily. So she ran out in the yard and hollered for him, and he came down and killed the snake. And the next day, they were building the wall out there. He had the guys build the snake into the wall. So I know exactly where that snake is built into the rock wall.
Now that's history right
There
there.
you go.
That's history. Okay, now we're going to finally move on. Thank you so much, Bill and Mark, both of you, for just near to my heart. Now we're going to go back to the earlier age again. We've left the mid-century. Now we're going back to, again, the storybook style. This is another great house that was done and that we had something to do with. Lucky enough. The name of this estate is called Dunwick. It was not named Dunwick originally by the original owner, but it was named actually by my friends, the Elys, that bought this house and had us do some renovations and additions to this house. This house was from 1926. It was designed for an industrialist from Chicago named Dr. H.C. Metcalf and his wife, as a winter cottage. And they bought this land. They bought this entire mountainside, this whole hillside of probably 30-something acres. And they immediately hired a woman named B.D. Van Aken, who was one of the very first registered female women architects in the country from Hollywood, California. She did actually more than one house here. She did this house, and she actually did Pookie's Castle, which is the Leitner house up there in Gottschall Hill, which is a very famous house, which I talked about that the last time. But anyway, so she left her mark, along with many other famous architects. She left her mark. She did this house again, started in 1926, and it's again the storybook style connotation of the English Tudor, and again the English arts and crafts. It's again the outside of the house really cool. A lot of ins and outs, interesting roof lines, but again the real joy of the house is, and that's the front of the house as you walk in. Beautiful old native stone again, just very informal. Beautiful old slate roof.
Where is it?
What's that?
Where is it?
Okay, I'm going to be honest with y'all. It's not in Tryon. I broke my own rule. I just had to get this house in because I love this house so much. To me, it's just about the coolest house in Tryon, along with the other ones I've shown you. No, this is so cool, and the fact that we had something to do with this house, we actually did a really nice addition to the back of the house here. Made me love this house.
But where is it?
It's actually when you first come into Columbus, you go up and it's right on Pinal Road, beginning of Pinal Road, and you can't see the house from anywhere. It actually, where Columbus Commons is, the shopping center we did several years ago, which is where Mel and Lowe's and the Chinese restaurant and all that are. That sits at the base of the hill. That was all part of this estate, and the former owner sold most of that property to developers, which then developed the whole thing. They carved away the hillside and started the whole strip development of Columbus right there. So this house actually sits at the very top of that hill above the shopping center. But you can't, there's no way you can see, it sits far enough back that you cannot actually see the house from anywhere. It's very much in the trees too. You can't see it from Mile Road either, for that matter. But it sits, I think there's about 14 or 15 acres left that it sits on from the original 30 that was there. So anyway, so it's a fabulous house. The Metcalfs lived in it for part-time for many years, it was then sold and many famous people. The Metcalfs were very well connected with Hollywood and, of course, you know, with the entertainment industry, and they had a lot of their famous friends that visited this house very frequently. Probably some names you've heard thrown around Tryon a few times, like F. Scott Fitzgerald, Mrs. Calvin Coolidge, and of course David Niven, Lady Astor, and George Gershwin, and the names go on and on. This is what we like to do in this town, is drop famous names. They all spent time and visited this wonderful old place. And they sold it to, I'm trying to remember the name of the lady that bought, the family that bought the house afterwards, and the lady of the house lived in it until she died. When we saw the house first, this was in the early 2000s when we were first brought to the house, before our friends the Elys brought it. The Elys are from Spartanburg. They were looking for a place in Tryon to move. They wanted an old house they could fix up, and boy did they find this one. Well, before they bought it, they called us to ask us to come over and see what we thought of it, see if we thought it had potential. And we walked in, we were so wowed by the outside, we walked into the living room, and there was nothing to it. It was this flat ceiling, drywall ceiling, about 9 feet above, very nondescript. You couldn't tell anything about the quality of the room until we walked upstairs. And when we walked upstairs, we saw, that's another shot of the entrance when you first walk in. I will tell you in a minute. You will see it. We were surprised, to say the least. Beautiful detailing. I love the trowel stucco there, and the grapevine, the joinery on the stonework is something again you didn't see very often. That was quite a thing right there. That's when you first walk into the house. This has a little bit more of a grand foyer than the other houses we've talked about today. One of my favorite things is that little storage closet right there, which is where all the little grandkids would go and hide. Anyway, so everything in this house, so I won't say everything's original, but I'd say 90% of everything in this house is original to the house itself. So the Elys bought the house from Mrs. whatever her name was, I can't remember right now, but from her estate, from her kids. And then the very first thing we discovered was not this, but we walked upstairs. I'll come back to this. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm going in backwards order. I'm not giving you the full effect of what we've found. I'm gonna go backwards and show this, but I have to show you the where is it? Come on, please. Ah, yes. We walked upstairs. Had not seen anything spectacular yet. We walked through those doors. This is a minstrel's gallery through these doors right here, okay? We walked, and all we saw were these fabulous, huge trusses that ran from one end to the other. And we saw the top half of this gorgeous fireplace. And we saw this ceiling below us. She had covered up all this because she wanted to save money. She didn't want to have to heat all that space. So she covered it all up with a drywall ceiling. But we walked up there, our jaws dropped. And so that was our first hint as to what a fabulous house this was. Those are those trusses up there. I wet my pants. I was just so blown. And this is one of my favorite styles of architecture anyway. And I just, and I hadn't been in Tryon that long. I just knew that the house is this cool. We're in Tryon. So I was so excited about that. And so immediately we said, yeah, you got to buy this house. Because we're gonna show this thing off. And so anyway, that's the first hint of that. Thank you. Okay. All right. So anyway, that's what we first saw. We took the ceiling away. That's looking down into the great room, and I'm going to just show you. Go backwards now and show you That's the minstrels gallery stuff right there. But first, I'm going to go back very quickly, because I'm out of time. I know I am. I'm always out of time. How come that won't work? Why won't this work? Okay, this ain't working.
Calls it knows you're out of time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. All right, y'all. What did I do? Ann, did you do this? You did it on purpose.
I did.
Well, y'all overstayed anyway, and I'm sure y'all are ready to leave. So maybe this is a good excuse to quit as anything. I hate this because there were so many great pictures of this house, but you can right away see just that little bit the quality of the house. And so the Ely's lived here. They did a lot of work. There was a lot of just wear and tear on the house, and a lot of things that had not been maintained. They had a lot of repair, not just the additions that we did, but to go back and repair all the molding and everything that was kind of left, and so a lot of sweat and heart went in from them. And then, unfortunately, Beth got cancer, and it sort of killed their hopes for the project. So they eventually ended up selling to current owners, Danielle and Joe, who are now also adding more of their own touches, but they're staying true to the house. Again, I wish this worked, but anyway, that's it, I guess, for now. So what I'll do then is I'll pick up with this on the next show. I'll finish this topic the next time, because it'll be more organized, and I'll get into more of the commercial buildings and some of the other things. So thank y'all so much. I'm sorry that we got a little bit of a late start, but I hope y'all enjoyed it.
Thank you, Dean. Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, I don't know, my suggestion would be that if you want to stick around, maybe Dean will too for a few minutes to ask questions. Because we have gone a little bit past our time limit, but tribute to this guy that I think everybody stayed.
I thank y'all so much too for having the patience to hang around, and there's just so much to talk about.
Well, we do appreciate it, and our next Tales presentation is scheduled for Roseland Community Center in February with Warren Carson, telling us something about the history of that community center, which was built, I believe, in 1949, and maybe a little bit more about the east side of town. We need to work out some details. Going to try to get the schedule published and out, circulated in January on what we have in mind for next year, which will be about a presentation about every other month. About a dozen of them. We're going to try to put quality ahead of quantity next year, and maybe in 24 we can have both.